Hello. Welcome back. On this episode of Corey Hughes' Bloody History, we are going to be talking about Mr. George Gaudet, and we're going to review his interview with spook attorney Bernard Fensterwald. It says Festerwald, but it's really Fensterwald. So, this is fascinating because Gaudet was the guy who was in there on September 17th at the Mexican consulate to get his visa to go to Mexico City. Same date that allegedly Lee Harvey Oswald got his visa to go to Mexico City. Also, who else got their visa to go to Mexico City on the 17th? Pop quiz. Who's the third person to get their visa on the 17th of September? Dun, 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 dun. It was David Pierce Magyar, the pilot who probably flew Kerry Thornley down there. Gaudet seems to have been somebody involved, direct CIA employee, not even denied, it's acknowledged, running propaganda stuff out of the Latin American Report, out of the International Trade Mart building, believe it or not. And, so this is going to be an interview with George Gaudet by Bernard Fensterwald. But Bernard Fensterwald, he's not a fucking innocent bystander in all this either. He's a CIA lawyer. Was Bernard Fensterwald the lawyer for fucking Raul? No, that was, what's his name? We'll get to it the other time. We'll get to it another time. So this is a memo by the FBI talking about this interview. So I think they got a copy of it and they just put it through their typical channels. So let me read the FBI's brief report on it, and then we'll get to the interview itself. Memo of conversation between William George Gaudet and Bernard Fensterwald at Waveland, Mississippi, May 13th, 1975. Gaudet is 67 years of age and in poor health. Semi-retired, writes for a local newspaper. During World War II, Gaudet worked as a secret agent in Latin America for Nelson Rockefeller, coordinator of the Latin American affair under FDR. Switched to CIA in 1947 and worked for them until 1969. During this time, he published Latin American Newsletter and Latin American Report, which he claims were 100% commercial ventures and not CIA fronts. However, he traveled constantly in Latin America and combined his commercial work with his CIA assignments. The latter, according to him, were basically uncompensated. Some expenses were picked up by CIA and done for patriotic purposes. There were 3 others in New Orleans area who did likewise. Gaudet is a right-winger, generally disliked JFK, kept his CIA activities very secret, not even telling his wife. Only told the FBI in 1963, no one else. Latin American Newsletter cost $15 per week. Both CIA and KGB had in excess of 20 subscriptions, which means that each of them subsidized Gaudet to the tune of more than $15,000 annually. As to JFK slaying, believes Warren report is fairy story, which shall become completely unglued very soon. Believes anti-Castro forces involved. Personally believes they had a right to hate JFK. Thinks the plot was hatched soon after the Bay of Pigs and came to fruition in 1963. As to having the Mexican travel permit serially next to Oswald's, Gaudet explained that it was a complete coincidence and that he never met Oswald. He backs and fills on whether he flew to Mérida or Mexico City. What is of more interest is the fact that he was interviewed 3 times by the FBI about it. Before telling them anything, he checks with Bill, the CIA station chief in New Orleans, who in turn checks with Langley. It is decided that Gaudet should answer questions re-Mexican trip, but nothing more, and FBI promises to keep Gaudet's name to itself and save his cover. Apparently, they did so until 1972, when his name was inadvertently declassified. Gaudet says that the FBI report about his having reported on Ruby's buying paintings from Borenstein is a complete fabrication. He didn't know either Borenstein or Ruby, and he wouldn't volunteer the time of day to the FBI. In the last week, FBI has called and is going to re-interview Gaudet. For whom? Gaudet says he never met Oswald and that he only observed him upon occasion. Question mark on this? In any event, he describes him as a miserable little creature who would do anything for money. Believes he was being financed by someone. Most seriously doubts if he could have pulled off the rifle fire in Dealey Plaza, as Lee Harvey Oswald was terribly nervous and disorganized. Believes Lee Harvey Oswald worked both sides of the Cuban Street. Doesn't really admit knowing what he was up to. Rumored to have an office in a building immediately across from the Trade Mart. He knew Lee Harvey Oswald went to Mexico by bus. Gaudet described the CIA setup in New Orleans in detail, large offices with approximately redacted people, similar to CIA setup in all ports, unmarked offices, unlisted phone. New Orleans office headed by Bill, a lawyer, prominent family debutante daughter, since learned that Bill is redacted and office is redacted. CIA New Orleans had closed circuit to Langley. CIA only paid Gaudet's special travel expenses when their tasks couldn't be done on his regular trips. Gaudet was once flown to Langley to brief CIA on Latin American affairs. Laughs when he thinks of Rockefeller as head of a commission to study either CIA or Dallas. Miscellaneous and leads. Ferry knew Lee Harvey Oswald and Shaw, but Shaw wasn't CIA and had nothing to do with Dallas. Thinks E. Howard Hunt knows more about Dallas than any other person he can think of. Hunt was God to the Cubans, and he is certain that a CIA sent Hunt out immediately after Dallas to see what he could find out about the Cuban connection. Knows of Lee Harvey Oswald's cousin, Marilyn Moret, in an intelligence connection. That we'll get into sometime. Marilyn Moret, who was Dutz Moret's daughter, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's first cousin, she was in the False Perfective program also. She went to goddamn Eastern fucking Europe at a time when nobody goes to Eastern fucking Europe in these communist countries. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. In 1962 and 63. But she did. So, yeah, she's intelligence also. Why, says Sergei Arkacha-Smith, should be cross-examined if alive and subpoenaable. Suggestions for interview, E. Howard Hunt, and then a name that's redacted, and then Marilyn Moret, John Alice, Sergei Arkacha-Smith, Alberto Fowler, David Pierce Magyar, and Ronnie Kerr. Okay, so here we have a reference to Gaudet giving the name of David Pierce Magyar. Okay, just coincidence he knows the fucking guy and also went to the consulate on the same day? Bullshit. So that's all for this memo. Let's get into the interview itself. Interview of William George Gaudet, May 13th, 1975 in Waveland, Mississippi, by Bernard Fensterwald and Alan Stone. So we have Gaudet, Fensterwald, and Stone here, and as I usually do with these interviews, I'm not going to read the name of the person unless I feel like it needs to because we get confused. So, starts off with Gaudet, yes, Miller, and then Fensterwald says, Miller. Stone says, that's the man we understand that interviewed you. The date is right and the FBI's agent name is right and your name is right as far as I can tell. Yeah, but I've already asked them because I didn't ask you, but I assumed that if you were in any way involved with the Central Intelligence Agency, I couldn't understand why you would call the FBI and volunteer, especially volunteer information like that. Says there's a long pause. Did you contact the FBI at all about this case? I do recall that when the FBI first came, I phoned my contact with the CIA, but they first came to you. That's right, and the CIA said they'd have someone come to my office immediately, and for me to say nothing until they arrived. When the CIA agent arrived, he asked the FBI man for his complete and total credentials, and he then wanted to ask me the question, was I identified with the CIA? And he warned me anything that I would say could later be used for grand jury use in a case I didn't tell them the truth. I said that might be true, but I said I've also got to find out how does the CIA feel about this? And so my CIA contact at that time, he first called the FBI to find out whether this man was, in fact, an FBI agent, and then phoned his office in Washington, and the office in Washington advised that I could say that I had a connection with the CIA, but that I was under no obligation to reveal anything that I had ever done for the CIA. That I could refuse to give out that information on the basis of the protection of national security. And this is exactly what I did. But they keep coming back and back and back again. Or, what was the purpose of my trip to Dallas? I mean, to Mexico. Well, Mr. Gaudet, before getting into that, I want to just establish this one thing for sure. Now, you're seeing this is all, and I'm sorry, and I don't have the books with me. There are very few copies of the Warren Report. This is it. This paragraph right here is all that you are mentioned anywhere in the 26 volumes. Now, let me go back to you did call the FBI on the 27th. No. Did you relate any information about Jack Ruby buying paintings from Lorenzo Borenstein? No. Why would they have printed that? Do you have any idea? I have no idea. Did you know Lorenzo Borenstein? No, I did not. Did you know Jack Ruby? No, I did not. Okay, well, it doesn't really make any sense then, does it? What I'm trying to say is, that there is no reason to put you in there at all if they are going to just put some falsehoods. Well, isn't that what we were talking about? That's exactly what we're talking about. You see, this was the building Clay Shaw, the New Orleans businessman charged by D.A. Garrison, and then the rest of the sentence is redacted. Then says, Stone says somebody else as a point of reference. More redactions. I don't know why this is fucking redacted. Gaudet, yeah. Stone, I've already told you that, but I thought that some of the people think that the International Trade Mart was part of the CIA people. Well, this is an outright lie. Which one? The thing about this reference in the Warren report to my being with or phoning the FBI about Jack Ruby. They just made that up. They would have had to. I wonder if in fact he did buy any paintings. That doesn't sound like. Now, the only possible way that he could possibly find out anything about Lorenzo Borenstein deal is I had an employee at that time by the name of Mrs. Lila Pinson, who was active in art circles. Her husband was a painter, as a matter of fact. They had an art gallery in the French Quarter, and it is quite possible that she knew Lorenzo Borenstein, but to my knowledge, she didn't even know Jack Ruby. As a matter of fact, I thought so little of the thing I didn't even ask her, because there was no reason to ask her about who Jack Ruby was. I didn't know. I thought he was somebody in Dallas, and I saw the first time I saw Ruby was in the actual shooting for the first time on television. Right. Where were you when you heard the news that John Kennedy was killed? The reason I ask is that most people have a very vivid memory. I recall it was in my office, and telephone rings. You were in your office. Yes, I know I was in my office because at that time we had a television set in the press club, which was located at that time in the International Trade Mart. And I went on down there then to listen to the news. And I remember it very well because there was a man by the name of McQueen, I think, who also despised Kennedy quite a bit. And he's the guy who came and told me about the news that Kennedy had been shot. And he says there's a question of whether he's living or dead. We don't know. And so with that news, why I went with him down to the press club and listened to the news broadcast at the time. And that I remember very well. This fellow McQueen is now dead. But what did you first think when you heard they'd arrested Lee Harvey Oswald? Struck me as strange that a man like that was capable of the job. That Lee Harvey Oswald, that I recall, I'm being very honest about it, was at best a miserable creature, highly nervous, and he certainly wasn't a well-dressed person by any manner of means. He would have been the last person in the world that I would have suspected ever could have been involved in this shooting, and even today it seems to me inconceivable. I question whether he could have fired that rifle one time, let alone kill the president. Why? Because he was that makeup. That's all. He was too nervous, or he was a very unstable person, and I don't think even he knew exactly what was distributing when he was distributing these pamphlets for the Fair Play for Cuba deal, which was nothing but a front. I don't know who else belonged to the organization. Nobody. He was it. It was a front. It was? One man? One man. Well, somebody had to give him money somewhere. Now, who gave him money? I don't know. Because I'm sure he never earned any money, because I don't know how he could have earned any money. Now, there was this character, I'm trying to recall him, I'm sure his name was Sergio Smith. That's Sergio Arcacha Smith. Yeah, Cuban. Yeah, that, was this guy Cuban that you're thinking of? Yeah, the way I came in contact with him was I was doing a documentary with Mel Levitt of WDSU Television in New Orleans, a 60-minute documentary that he offered to cooperate with us on information that he had. And he gave us a strip of film about Cuba that we thought we could use, and so we used it. Was this before or after the assassination? This was after the assassination, and so we used it. And now you sit me down to that. Assassination was 63. Castro went in 59. It could have been before, but I think it was after. Okay, so we've already gone through the testimonies of Kerry Thornley and fucking Philip Boatwright, and now we're on Gaudet. Do you see the selective fucking memory that these people have? No, it was after the assassination, but blah, 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 or it might have been before, but no, it was after. Like, no, it's confusing. He's saying he doesn't fucking want to tell you, is what he's saying. He's not saying he doesn't know. He's saying, fuck you, is what he's saying. This was after the assassination, and so we used it. And now you sit me down to that. Assassination was 63. Castro went in 59. It could have been before, but I think it was after. Do you see what he's doing here? This is anti-interrogation training. Well, I think you told me. I know this, that we were stopped from showing it a second time. Stone says, well, I thought the documentary was on the assassination. Gaudet says, no, it was on the betrayal of Cuba. Okay. Fensterwald asks who stopped you from showing it the second time. Gaudet says, I understand that the order came from, I understand Mel Levitt probably could give you a definite answer, but we had sold it to Pan American Life and they had paid for it, and we were also planning to sell it to many others, but we were not allowed to. And Ed Reed was the vice president of the station at that time, and he's still in New Orleans. And Mel Levitt was the man who was master of ceremonies, the whole thing. And I'm the man who wrote the documentary itself, and this Smith guy, Acosta Smith, he suddenly disappeared and we couldn't find him. Did he know Oswald? I would say offhand, yes. Could you tell us how you reached that conclusion? He knew so many people, frankly. He had such a weird background. I know he went from New Orleans to Dallas. He was a former diplomat for Batista at one time. He was? Yes. That I did not know. Back in the 1950s, in the early 50s, I think that I've got a biography somewhere. Where is he now? He's either in Mexico or he's dead. This is a biography of him. That's the film he gave me was his. Now, if I recall, either the FBI or someone else claimed that it did not belong to him and that we had no right to use it. And we therefore had to do it over completely and leave all reference to this out, or never to use the film again. And I think the situation decided they would scuttle the whole thing because it was a center of much controversy when we produced it. It had more favorable listeners than unfavorable, but it was a source of much controversy, and so but this Arcacho was a shadowy figure, and it was hard to pin him down exactly on just what he was up to. Why was he willing to help us? Where was he from? Where was he going? And I don't know the last knowledge of that I had him in Texas when he had gone to Dallas, Texas. Would you think it possible that he might have absconded with some money that was collected for an organization called the Free Cuba Committee? I wouldn't doubt it at all. He's the type who would abscond with it. There was a man named Bill Dalzell and Ronnie Kerr, and some others that... Ronnie, I know Ronnie Kerr. He's still over here. That's right, and he's, I guess it was Guy Bannister. Yes. And Ronnie Kerr and Bill Dalzell and some others organized it, and the word we've got is that Arcacha Smith just defected with most of the money that he collected, and the organization was just left holding the bag. Gaudet says, well, as you know, Guy Bannister was an old FBI agent. Whether he was a retired agent or whether he was a discharged agent, I don't know. But he was at one time with the FBI, and Ronnie Kerr is now back to his public relations work, living over in Pass Christian, which is right across the bridge from here. And now Ronnie knew Bannister much better than I did. I knew Bannister, but I didn't know him that well. Do you know how he died? No. Let me go back a little bit. I've got so many questions that I want to ask. All right. We had you on the day of the assassination. You said it didn't make any conceivable sense to you that when you found out they'd picked up a man named Lee Harvey Oswald in Dallas and were holding him on this case, but you said you contacted somebody in Washington, somebody in the military. Yes, I called a man by the... And then it cuts off. Okay, doesn't fucking tell the guy's name. It says tape ends. Okay, it was such utter disbelief to me that Lee Harvey Oswald, the Lee Harvey Oswald who I had seen in action, possibly could have done this. It just didn't seem that the man had it in him, let alone pulling it off, and I was frightened as to what was going on, and so I wanted to get a sidebar of what the steps the military was taking. And that was all. That's the only reason I called. And he told me they were on full station alert for anything because they didn't know themselves. So I would say that when the shooting and death of Kennedy occurred, the entire military establishment in the United States was on full-scale alert, ready for anything because they didn't know what was coming up. And I think that is borne out by previous later statements that this was one of the reasons why Lyndon Johnson wanted to take the oath of office as fast as he did. I know he's been criticized for taking it so fast. I think he did it because I think the military is the one who advised him to take it so that we wouldn't be without a government. That's my opinion. What did the colonel tell you as to the possibility of this being a broader plot than just what was going on in Dallas? Okay, so obviously the person that he called that was fucking cut from this interview was a colonel up in Washington somewhere. Who? Beats me. Gaudet says, he said they didn't know, but their information was that they should go on full alert for everything. Any emergency, and they were ready for it, and that the MP units all over the United States were instructed out of Washington to go on full alert, and because they didn't know where it would crop out next. You knew that almost all the cabinet was in a single airplane on its way to Hawaii. Then this happened. I'd forgotten it. With the except Bobby Kennedy and I think Stuart Udall, I think all the rest of the cabinet, including Secretary of State and all the rest of them, the Secretary of the Treasury, were all on their way out to the Pacific somewhere, and they were in a plane over the Pacific Ocean when this happened. And the President and Vice President, of course, were in the parade, so that's not a very far-fetched alert. Did you ever hear anything from Washington, maybe this man or somebody in the military, the possible fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was captured and his identity surfaced so quickly that this might have, that this was important, that this was good for the country in terms of possibly heading something off, probably? No, I didn't have any further contact with him on it because I didn't have any need. I thought you told me something about that last week when I... No, there wasn't any need, and he was a major at that time, and he then later went on to Vietnam, became a full colonel over there, and he now has taken his retirement. He's still a young man. He lives in Augusta, Georgia now, but as I told you in the first day, I think the man who probably knows as much as anybody alive on all this is Howard Hunt, frankly. Would you tell us why you think, do you know Howard Hunt? I know of him and his activities. I don't know him personally. What about his activities that would lead you to connect him with this? Well, he was the prime organizer of the Bay of Pigs, as you know, right? And he was the man that put this whole show together. And he was also the man that I'd say was trusted more by the Cubans than any gringo that I know of. And I know that these Cubans who went up there that were solicited by Hunt did it out of blind loyalty to Hunt. I mean, the ones that they had to pay the penalty, the Watergate ones, yes, and I think that anything that Hunt would have asked them to do, he would have done, and I'm sure the FBI, the CIA, would have called on Hunt to ask him to help them see what was going on in connection with the conspiracy among the Cubans. So, that's why I say I think he should know more than anybody else alive, even more than McCord. And his activities immediately after the shooting, do you think that the government would ask him to, I would have to, information? I consider the CIA a very smart operating organization, and I'm quite sure that Washington called on Hunt to undertake something right away and find out what it was all about. And I'm sure that he must know, and I'm sure he knows who was involved. Is this just a hunch of yours? No, I think it's based on cold facts of what he did. His activities he was held in the highest esteem by the CIA despite what the Watergate says. And all the inferences that he did all this stuff for money was just plain lot of bull. Whoever influenced him to get involved in the Watergate, I don't know, because I don't know the Watergate background at all. I still think that only possible connection for using CIA men is that they were convinced somewhere along the line that this possibly was a CIA thing because they were interested in trying to trace the flow of money. I know they were. And at the time, I know the flow of money ran as chain from Moscow to Havana, Havana to Mexico City, and from Mexico City by various sources up to the United States. And this much I know of my own knowledge, that this is the way it came. What money is this? Because I'm a little... The hush must be hush money. The hush money that they used to cooperate in this country. And I think a lot of this, I'm sure, where they wanted to go to George McGovern's campaign. I see. And you see, George McGovern was definitely the communist choice to be elected president. There is no question of that. Anybody who denies that's got to be an imbecile. I think that's pretty obvious. Here's a man who says we'll make peace with Hanoi, and then after we settle our peace and withdraw our troops, then we'll sit down over a table and see what the peaceful withdrawal of all of our prisoners of war. Well, anybody who knows a commie knows we would never have gotten one back home. They would all have stayed over there in prison, and there's only one force that a communist respect, and that's the question of force. And regardless of what people say about our slaughtering people in Hanoi, if we hadn't dropped those bombs in Hanoi, we'd never had those POWs home. I know a lot of people don't like Nixon. It's a dirty word and a dirty name, but I think that's one decision he took which was right. And I just wonder there, and have often wondered why, with all the firepower we had over in Vietnam, it wasn't really used. Well, the same thing was true in Korea, of course. MacArthur's basic complaint was the same thing. Why we didn't use it in... Look, we could have. We could have defeated the Viet Cong in less than 30 days with what we had. And then Mr. Stone asked a question, and it's redacted. It's redacted, and then the assassination. And then, no, I don't, but I could have, frankly, but I don't know. I don't know what he's asking him there. What I'm trying to say, I don't doubt you at all. I'm trying to think if we could have anything substantive that would put E. Howard Hunt in there. Maybe, as you said you thought it was based on cold fact that he was probably snooping, doing this thing out to see what the hell was going on. But I remember, Gaudet says, I know a lot of the Cubans that were involved. Involved in these big Cuban movements and everything else. And even in New Orleans is still involved. And I know that every last one of them had the very highest respect for E. Howard Hunt. I meant it was a mystic name. Just mention Hunt. and they would follow through on something. And but getting back to the basic issue of the CIA involvement, to me, this was a question in '63 of which I've always felt. I think the FBI was going out of its way and always had been wanting to discredit the CIA. It didn't want it. If it had been up to Hoover, it would have never been created. And the result was that the CIA offices here were, and we had them at every port of entry. Every one of them carried no identification, no listing in the phone book, or the names of the persons who were in charge of the offices. None of it listed. No records are available, and yet they were here. Was it at the International Trade Mart here? No. It was not? No. Because I've often wondered, nope, it was not. It was another unmarked office building here in New Orleans. Here in New Orleans, yes. We had another one in Miami. We had one in Houston. We had one in Los Angeles. Something told me a man, the director of the office in Houston, did an interview the other day and talked about recruiting businessmen and salesmen and people like yourself. Didn't he tell you the same thing I told you? Oh, yeah, exactly. That's why I brought it up. He said exactly what you told me. That's the way they carried on intelligence in Central and South America. This is the way that they redacted to patriotic businessmen and people in other businesses. It wasn't for money that people did this. Oh, no, I know. There were many things I know of that did it. I wasn't alone. God knows. Like you were telling me on the phone that someone said my magazine was a front for the CIA. Well, I mentioned that to my wife. She says, I wish I'd have known that in time because maybe they could have picked up some of the tabs that we owed when I closed it in '69. Did the local CIA office in New Orleans operate under a front of some kind? None. There must have been something on the door. Nothing. Absolutely nothing on the door. Was it in the federal building? No, it was a private building. Private building. That's right. Could you tell us if your principal is still running it? I'm sure he's either dead or retired, and he was the man that took it over, was the head of it. When he first came in, was a very, very prominent New Orleans and a very prominent lawyer. Probably one of our highest paid lawyers in New Orleans, and I'm sure he took it on more for, again, to go back to the same thing. This is the greatness of the CIA. They depend on the dedication of the person and their basic patriotism rather than dangle a few ugly dollars in front of their face. This is why the CIA was able to operate with such, I would say, almost complete secrecy until Washington started opening its mouth. If Washington had kept its mouth shut, nobody would even know there would be an animal such as the CIA. That's true. And I think the CIA had the finest cover of any agency that I know of. It really was buried. You couldn't find it, in effect. That's right, and this was meant to be that way. That's right. How many people would you guess, like yourself, for patriotic reasons, were connected, just say, to the New Orleans office alone? New Orleans alone? To my knowledge, I know of 4 others. I suspect these 4 others. None of us knew what the other one did. Well, that's the way it should be. So I can't say it was definite, but I sort of suspect it to be because do you think there were more that you didn't know of? Or do you think, I doubt the way they could have found more than that that were active enough. Probably I was the most active of all because mine was the most, I probably traveled more than anybody. Wasn't that expensive for you? No, not in my line of work because I was originally editor of this newsletter and we sold it for $15 a week and I had some pretty fancy clients. So let's put this in perspective. $15 a week in 1963 is about $100 today. Okay? Who the fuck you think was buying subscriptions to the Latin American Report for $100 a week? Intelligence organizations. That is it. The idea that the average person gives a fuck enough about Latin America to write a magazine about it. Bullshit. Fensterwald says I was going to say, who did you sell it to at that price? Oh, First National City Bank, New York, Bank of Boston, Chase Manhattan, United Fruit. One of the biggest customers. I guess my biggest customer was the CIA. Coming second was the Soviet Union. I don't recall rightly now whether it was the Soviet Union first or second, but it was they each bought at least 20 copies of the report. They bought it at, did they buy it in retail that way? That's right. I didn't give them a penny off. And it was $15 per week for a subscription. Right. That doesn't, I can see that it would be very successful. We never lost money on the newsletter. Was it a one-man operation or did you have people? No, I had people working for me. Did you have them around Latin America? Oh, I had people in Latin America, yes. Yes, did you have, I had stringers. How about other people here? Yeah, I had other workers here. Oh, when did you close this down? 69. Did you sell it? Somebody else take it up, did you? Nope. The newsletter gradually was being eclipsed by the magazine, and I had to keep dropping the price of the other newsletters came into existence. First National City started putting one out. Bank of Boston put one out, and Hansen dropped the price of his newsletter, his Latin American letter out of Washington, so I had to keep dropping the price of the newsletter that it finally was, in effect, absorbed by the magazine itself. But the magazine was a costly process. It was actually cost me a lot of personal money and lost a lot of money for me. And about the only thing I got out of it was a lot of free travel. When did you close it down? 69. You retired? Just walked away from it, that's all. Quit publishing? I just quit publishing. I sold my list of subscriptions to Vision Magazine in exchange for their giving these people Vision Magazine and the newsletter that they published then. Now, since then, I understand they've had their problems. I wanted to get back to this redacted on the assassination. Now, we have going to the 27th on this interview with the FBI. Yeah. Do you recall, where were you? Did they call you or come by your office or what? They came by my office. What did they use to talk to you? They said the FBI said they wanted to talk to me, and the man introduced himself to me, and he wanted to talk to me about my trip to Mexico. And he said was with the FBI, and then he asked about the CIA, and I said, well, now, just a moment. And that was when I excused myself and went out to the other room, and I phoned my CIA contact over there. In New Orleans? In New Orleans, the head of it. And he says, say nothing at all. Tell him you're waiting for somebody to come over and don't identify who I am. Well, who were you calling? Where were you? I went outside to another phone. Yes. Was he in Waveland? No, New Orleans. Oh, okay, I see. All right, I'm sorry. No, this didn't occur here. And then you just went back and waited till he got there? That's right. I told him I was waiting for a friend to come before I could talk. And did he identify himself when he got there? This man? Yeah. No, he did not. What did the FBI say to him? I told him he was an attorney friend of mine, and so that was when he demanded of this man his credentials and so forth and so on, wanted to see them. And his first call was to the local FBI to find out whether the man was with the FBI, and when he did find out, why then he excused himself and went out to the other phone outside and phoned the CIA in Washington to get advice as to what to do. And this is when the advice came for me to admit that I had done work for the CIA in the past, and that under no circumstances could I reveal any of my actual activities, because if they ask why not, tell them it was a question of national security. Well, then did they ask you about your trip to Mexico? They asked me specifically about that, and I told them that was purely coincidental and had nothing to do with it, and they asked why I was on a CIA assignment. I said, I don't think I can answer that question, and I'd rather not answer that question, as to the best of my knowledge. I was not on a CIA assignment, but that doesn't mean that further down the line that I wasn't going to be doing something for the CIA, that I could have been caught for perjury, and I had put it that way. Did you go to Mexico City or to Meridia? No, I went to Mexico City. Mexico City. And then from Mexico City, I changed planes. I was there a day, as I recall, or 2 days, and then I picked up TACA, with a question mark, like TACA Airlines, and flew from TACA down south, and because I had an exchange on TACA. Are you sure? Are you sure now you went down to Mexico City? Yes. What kind of passport travel did you have in those days? I had a regular passport. A regular passport. The number on it seemed strange to me. It had more digits than the normal passport. I thought maybe you had a diplomatic passport, or what they call, not a diplomatic but a special. No, there is a difference between them. I've forgotten what. As a matter of fact, I had a diplomatic passport only for a very, very brief period of my life, and that was when when it became obvious that we were going to win the war. The State Department, which is a very jealous organization to say the very least, finally says they got a hold of Mr. Roosevelt, and they says it's about time that we bring this coordination committee out from under the cover that it's under, and we'll call a spade a spade. And we think Mr. Gaudet, instead of posing as a private citizen with lots of money, that he'd come out and be named press attaché to the embassy. So there was nothing for Mr. Rockefeller to do but get in touch with me and tell me, Bill, old boy, you're going to have to close down the committee and let all your employees go, and you're now on the State Department's payroll, subject to the ambassador. What city was this in? San Jose, Costa Rica? I see. See, I selected San Jose as my Central American headquarters. I was asked to see which place I wanted, and San Jose was the most attractive city in Central America in which to live. Was this Rockefeller money or U.S. money you were using? It was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's private fund. It wasn't Rockefeller's money? No, although Rockefeller used a tremendous amount of his own money on his own travels. Yeah. I don't think Mr. Rockefeller ever used any of Mr. Roosevelt's money. He didn't need to. Gaudet says, I think he got a dollar a year as the coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, and as a matter of fact, I'm saying that here is where your pattern is set. Rockefeller got people who were willing to do a nasty job with little reward for little money. On my last salary paycheck with King Features, which was in 41, was over $17,000, and I went to work with Mr. Rockefeller for $6,500. That's the difference. And I know one man who was in Rio who was with an advertising agency in California who was making in excess of $100,000 who went to Rio for $6,500 a year. Now, that's sure a sacrifice. Now, you can't say these people were interested in money. That's right. When you took this day trip to Mexico, you were going through... Yes, you put on the application that you were a tourist rather than a businessman. It looks as though... I always did that. Mm-hmm. In other words, that was just that was not unusual for me. Go ahead. I've got the FBI interview. I want you to look at it before. This is what the man who talked to you, I believe, his name was Special Agent Miller. The man that's on here, well, he got back, he typed up all this and sent it on to Washington. All right. It says here that you got off in Merida. No. Your flight landed in Merida. Your Pan American flight that they grilled you so hard about. No, I went to Mexico City. I'm sorry they got it wrong because that's Pan American flight. I didn't take that. I took Eastern to Mexico City. I see. So you didn't take a Pan American flight after all? No, because there was no connection there outside of Taka for me there. It had to be out of Mexico City. Do you have records of this? And then the tape ends. So, whenever the tape ends, it doesn't seem to pick up in the same spot, but we'll see. Fensterwald says apparently, and Gaudet says yes, but he was not, and then redacted. Gaudet, to the best of my knowledge, he was not. Yeah. Stone asks, I'm looking out for you. And that's what, that's why I'm asking you, because according to this report, you told the FBI that you left on the 19th by Pan American at 12 o'clock noon, but that you could not recall the flight number, but that you were positive Oswald wasn't on the first class section, and further stated that you did not observe Oswald in the tourist section. He, talking about you, stated that this Pan American flight landed in Merida and then continued to other Central and South American countries. Gaudet stated that he did not actually enter Mexico as he was continuing on to South and Central American countries. Now, I'm telling you this because this is what they reported you said. Well, my recollection was it was Mexico City, but if I took that flight, I went to Guatemala and got off. If I took that flight, I'd have gotten off in Guatemala. Because Taka does not connect in Guatemala. Now, I could be mistaken on the question of Mexico City versus Merida because I went frequently by Merida to Guatemala. That wasn't unusual. Okay, do you see how he's bullshitting them? He's changing his answers, flip-flopping, and well, it may be. See, once again. He wants them to leave this interview knowing absolutely nothing. Would you need a Mexican tourist? No. Entrance visa? No. Entry permit to do that? No. So chances are you did go by Mexico City. That's what I say. Otherwise, there's no reason to get the thing in the first place. There would have been none at all. Yeah, and there was another man that got one the same day. I wonder if you would happen to know him, a man by the name of David Pierce Magyar, Magyer. Do you know what he does? First hand, I don't know. I do know that he was a friend of David Ferry's, which just struck me as odd. He was a friend of David Ferry's? Yeah, said he was. What he told the FBI, they interviewed all these people like that you got. Well, you know who David Ferry was, don't you? Well, he was an Eastern Airlines pilot, but after that, I'm not sure what he did. Do you? Well, he became a private pilot. I mean, he used to give flying lessons, and he was a friend of a lot of queers, including Clay Shaw. He was a friend of Shaw's? Right. Do you know if he knew Oswald? Yes, I think he did know Oswald. I think this is the link that Garrison was basing everything on. You think that was a valid link, but the link between Oswald and Shaw was non-existent. Yeah, but between Oswald and Ferry, you think was a valid link. That's right, but I don't think either one of them was capable of planning a conspiracy like this. What? After David Ferry left Eastern Airlines, you say he became a pilot? Well, I know he set up a flying school out here at New Orleans Airport. Well, wasn't he also a private investigator? He may have called himself one, but I don't know it. Well, there are records that he worked for both Guy Bannister and Carlos Marcello. He was actually in the courtroom with Marcello when Kennedy was murdered. He was working for... Yeah, that's a lie. He was not in the fucking courtroom. He was in Dallas. Yeah, it could have been. Is that where Carlos Marcello was, in the courtroom when Kennedy? Well, they can't blame him with that. They can't blame him, and they can't blame Ferry because they were both sitting at the federal courthouse. Ha! He's been blamed for everything else, so I was wondering why they didn't blame him for that. Did you ever meet him? Marcello? Yes, I've met him, but I don't know him. He's a number one whipping boy of the federal government in New Orleans. Right. And they've never been able to really do anything to him. Well, they kidnapped him and took him to Guatemala once and dumped him off. Yeah, and they claimed he did that. And guess who flew him back? No. David Ferry. No kidding. Yep. Ha. David Ferry worked for him and for Guy Bannister. Guy Bannister was an interesting person. I've heard, and you may be able to enlighten me on this, that he headed up the FBI's Latin American operations out of New Orleans in a sort of covert way, because they weren't supposed to be operating all over Latin America, and they did it in competition illegally with the CIA. Does that ring a bell anywhere? No, but that doesn't surprise me either. This would be something that your CIA principal would know, but that you probably would not. Because you would not have to be privy to that. My superior would know. The CIA was not inclined to give you information even though you would give them information. One-way street. It was a one-way street. Now they would ask you seemingly completely unrelated questions about things to do on subjects they wanted you to look into. They were absolutely meaningless to you. You couldn't understand why they wanted it done, but when pieced together, it probably formed a complete pattern for them. And this was the way they operated, and so I don't know who finally pulled the rug under on the CIA. I think the man most responsible was J. Edgar Hoover. I think he had enough friends in Congress that really hammered away at the CIA long enough that they finally broke it out. And do you recall anything else about that interview with the FBI? Not too much. It didn't seem at the time to be rather important to you, huh? It didn't seem at the time to be that important to you. It seemed important to me, the fact that I was trying to explain the best way I could, and, it was important enough to me that I phoned my superior in contact with the CIA, that I got them over there to see that my interests were fully protected, and they were protected. That's how important I regarded it at the time. Well, the only reason I'm trying to nail this down is that I'm being very suspicious for a reason. I'm not doubting you at all, but it's, since you've already told me that the notion in the Warren Report is a complete falsehood. Yeah. The account of this interview was in contradiction with what happens it appears to be that you did on that trip, or what you said you did, which was that you went to Mexico City and on the interview on the travel visas. It also said in here that Gaudet stated in his opinion that if Oswald was a Marxist, that he would not have gone to Merida. This is based on the fact that you went to Merida, and this is in your opinion that this is strictly an anti-communist area. It is, that's correct. You know a lawyer in New Orleans by the name of Guy Johnson? Does that name ring a bell? Naval Intelligence? I know of it, yes. I had very little contact with Naval Intelligence, even though my son is with Naval Intelligence now. Is he? I mean, as a reserve officer. Yes, well, I spent many, many years with the Navy. He's a commander in the legal phase of the Navy. You know a fellow down here in New Orleans, and it's redacted? Nope. Ever seen him? Nope. What arrangements were made for you? You were talking about on the phone, and I wasn't taking notes at the time. You know, I said I didn't even know if I could get a hold of you, and I was so pleased that I didn't write any of this down, but you said, you talked to me something about there were arrangements made at that time, that you sat down with the FBI agents, that you were guaranteed, at least in your own mind, that you would be given top secret protection on all. Oh, they said that? Yes. Who's they? The FBI man said that I could speak with complete freedom because none of this was being released. This was for files of the FBI and no one else. You didn't think that they would turn it over to... No, I didn't. There was no Warren Commission at that time. No. That was 2 days before the commission was even formed. It was. Somebody was going to be investigating it for sure. Well, I thought at least the FBI could keep its word. And they didn't? Apparently they didn't, because the story in the New Times came out before this was declassified, so somebody gave it to them. Except they have the name of the magazine wrong. They had it as the Latin American Traveler. That was the only error I detected in it. Well, didn't you just say that you got assurances from the Justice Department and the Attorney General's office on this? Yes, through the CIA I got that. That I would be fully protected and go ahead. Well, obviously, you didn't think that you had a problem, except the fact that it was rather coincidental that you were in the office at the same time or the same day that Mr. Oswald was. And but again, I say I didn't know why, as much as they hounded me, why instead of telling a lie about me, they don't put the report in. Well, you see, Mr. Gaudet, this is what I contacted you for last week, and this is the problem that all of us that I don't understand either. See, the very fact that they suppressed and kept it quiet, I could go on and sit here and talk to you for 15 minutes about how they have gone to quite some detail to bury the fact that your number, which was FM824084, they went to quite some detail to try to say that this number was never issued to anyone. They said there was no record, that there was never any record of this being given out. They go through this elaborate scheme to... Well, let me play devil's advocate. This is Fensterwald. Do you suppose this was an attempt by the FBI to carry out their promise to him? They told him that they would try to keep his identity and material he was giving them within the FBI. Isn't that basically what they were telling you? That's right. And don't you suppose that maybe the fact said we can't find this FM number and we don't know who it is and so forth was an attempt to carry out this promise? It would seem to be that. In other words, the fact that he was CIA and that had promised that they would not make this public, and in fact they didn't from 1964 until 1975, something like that. So maybe they were trying to do what they had promised to do, even though they couldn't succeed in doing it. I don't know, but it looks to me like it's a possibility. That's right. Stone says, yeah, and you see, and I think this reason why there have been so few questions raised is that because now it has come out, and now we find out that this number, which we didn't think was issued to anybody, was issued to a man who was an employee of the CIA, and of course this casts some suspicions on Oswald and in your direction. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I've been doing this long enough now to realize that there are coincidences in life, and if I had been in New Orleans in 1963, I may have been in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald too, and that didn't necessarily mean that I was part of a giant conspiracy to either kill the president or to cover it up afterwards. How much time does McCord have to serve? He'll be out in less than a month. He's taking this all right. This is not, he's up in Allenwood, Pennsylvania, which is no country club, but it's not like being sent to Alcatraz or Atlanta or someplace like that. So I got a letter from him just about a week ago. So do you know a man in the trademark by the name of John Alice? Yes, he's a Costa Rican. Costa Rican? Yes. Does he help out with the agency at all? Of my own knowledge, I don't know, but he certainly would be the type to help them out. There's no particular reason that he shouldn't that you know of? No. How about a Japanese gentleman by the name of Ehara, E-H-A-R-A? Did not know him. The trademark at that time was a relatively small operation compared to what it is now, wasn't it? Uh-huh. And was your office right in the building? Uh-huh. Do you have any reason why Lee Harvey Oswald picked that site for handing out these crazy leaflets? If I'm not mistaken, the building opposite the trademark was supposed to have had an office. Oswald? Yes, whether he actually had one or not, I don't know, but it was a cheap rundown sort of place, which is where Oswald would probably stay if he stayed anywhere. And do you know roughly that address? It would be the first. It's torn down now. It's not 544 Camp Street. No, it's in the first block of Camp Street. Yeah, the first block of Camp Street. You say there was a rumor that he had an office there. Yes. Have you ever heard of that? I never heard of that. Uh-huh. Was that in connection with this Cuban business? Yes. Well, he was working both sides of the Cuban street, wasn't he? I think he was. Fensterwald then says, and you think that he had knowledge of the CIA and the FBI and others wanted? I don't think that Oswald actually knew anything. No. I think he was trying to pretend that he knew to get some money. I think that he was a miserable little creature who wanted to get some money, and he would play anything to get some money. And do you think he was getting any? No, I don't think so. What was he living on? Somebody had to be feeding it to him. I don't know. I tell you, a man who certainly should give you some information on Lee Harvey Oswald, because he interviewed him on the radio, is Junior Butler, Ed Butler Jr. How about Bill Stuckey? He should know him too. I don't know where he is now. I don't, but he could be found. He was in New Orleans, States, you know. Yeah. And he was trying to get his hand into the Latin American field at that time. And that's how I how I knew him. He used to come to see me all the time to get information about Latin American affairs and to help him on stories. And he called himself Latin American editor at one time on the States. Then he got into a drunken deal out at some club somewhere off Jefferson Parish, and I understand he took all his clothes off and he started running around the water deal owned by the city, and the police finally caught him. He really got drunk. So when they got him and put him in jail and lodged all these charges against him, why the states found it inconvenient to keep him on their staff any longer. So that was, to my knowledge, the last I've ever seen or heard of Bill Stuckey. You said that you obviously had some chances to observe Oswald rather closely because it was your immediate gut reaction. You know that he was not emotionally the kind of individual that could have killed Kennedy. You said that Clay Shaw had met him once. Was the Oswald that you came in contact with? I don't see anything wrong with that. I didn't say I met Oswald personally. I don't say I've met personally with Lee Harvey Oswald. No, because I don't. And then something's redacted, some conspiracy. And then Gaudet says, I wouldn't have any hesitancy about saying I'd met him if I'd met him. I have no other reason to say I'd met him if I hadn't, knew I'd met him. But I could see him out there delivering these circulars, and he struck me as a pitiful sort of little guy, and I'd sit by the mailbox out there and just watch him, trying to give out all these things and watch him in his boldness and things. And frankly, I put him down as a nut. Did he do this on more than one occasion? Oh, yes. He just got in a fight with Brunier or somebody and got picked up by the police. I don't know. I think Carlos went there on purpose. I had a feeling about that. Not only that, but the business about, the broadcast and all that was something that was sort of a PR operation. That was put on, I think, mostly by Junior Butler. That's right. And we come to the end of page 31, and we're going to pick this up tomorrow. So, William Gaudet, obviously a player in New Orleans in the CIA, knows everything going on with Sergio Contra, Clay Shaw, all these fucking guys. He's saying that Oswald was probably put on by a guy named Junior Butler, right? Junior Butler is the guy who put on, I guess he's behind the appearance on television, okay? So, guys in the research chat, pull the name Junior Butler, please. And so, yeah, that's going to do it. So, we're spending a lot of time on New Orleans. We're going to spend a fucking lot of time on New Orleans. I think we're going to saturate New Orleans. We'll be on New Orleans for quite some time. I was looking at some of the Lauren Hall stuff and some of the other mercenary stuff, William Seymour, and there ain't a whole lot. I'll tell you, there ain't a whole lot. And for the amount of investigation that fucking Garrison did and Weisberg did, for there to be like next to no files on fucking Seymour or Howard is ridiculous. Obviously, they were there once upon a time and were destroyed. The only one that's got a ton of files is Lauren Hall, and about half of them are newspaper clippings because that cocksucker could never stop running his fucking mouth. Never. So, but I'm enjoying this New Orleans stuff. I'm really starting to feel out. I hope you can see what I'm trying to do with this New Orleans stuff. Right, we're trying to like work it, right, and make this information malleable and flesh out the chain of command, right? Because obviously we have the relationships from the Israelis through Permindex and CMC, Bloomfield to Clay Shaw is a given, right? However, you got all this other CIA activity that's like barely connected. You can tell that this is a compartmentalized operation, and even talk about the assassination. Thornley and Ferry and these guys are not really seemingly connected with the larger scale operations that are going on in New Orleans to Latin America, right? It feels like these guys are compartmentalized from the rest of all this fucking shit going on in New Orleans. Involving Gaudet and like all these other people who were CIA assets at a minimum, right? So, but what we're doing is we're fleshing all this stuff out and we're trying to make these links, not necessarily through Clay Shaw, because Clay Shaw, we've got dead to rights on his connections through Lewis Bloomfield and CMC. Although we are desperately searching for the connection between Clay Shaw and Erwin Heyman. Because Clay Shaw was in Dallas, Erwin Heyman was in Dallas, and they were together, and that was before he ended up getting on his train or wherever the fuck to get to Portland, Oregon. So we know they were in Dallas, and we're trying to figure that out. But if we can track these fucking relationships from these other people, from like Gaudet to Junior Butler, we might be able to, if we can connect Junior Butler to say David Atlee Phillips, right? That would be phenomenal, right? Because that would be a clear-cut chain of command on how we got Oswald on television. I'm just speculating that. I'm just saying that. But any name that we could come up with in Washington that's connected to Junior Butler, we'd be able to say, yeah, this is likely the fucking chain of command that got Oswald on television, right? So, but that's going to do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow because I'm really enjoying doing this. I think I'm knocking them out every day now. And so that's it. If you haven't bought the book, please buy the book. They have not been selling this month. I think I sold like 10 or 15 maybe. I should be at like 30 or 40 at this point in the month, and I'm not. So please go out and buy the book. I have a bunch of, I got 2 soft covers that are available right now, $50 each, autographed. I can send those out in the mail tomorrow. Those are available through PayPal. You can message me or email me, and I can get you the information on how to order those. I'll have 10 more in a week. But that's it for today, guys, and we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks.